Today we are ranking my top 10 favorite science fiction and fantasy books of all time with one specific rule. I can only choose one book per series, which means some absolute monsters did not make it onto this list. These are not necessarily the objectively best written books I have ever read, but they are the ones that I think about on a daily basis, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 10, we have The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the final book in Mistborn Era 2, and yes, I am a Mistborn Era 2 over Era 1 truther, and you will do nothing to convince me otherwise. I think this book is the most fast-paced in any of the Mistborn books. I think it has the best emotional payoff, and what really surprised me about this book is how well the entire character arcs are differentiated between the entire series. Yes, Mistborn Era 2 does start out a little bit clunky. If you're unfamiliar, the first book was planned to be a standalone. The next books are more of a series, so the first book is a good book overall. The second book feels like a soft reset. The third and fourth absolutely slap, with the fourth one having the best and most emotional, impactful payoff of any of the Mistborn books. And that's why this comes in at number 10. Then at number 9, we have The Strength of the Few by James Islington. This is the second book in the four planned book series, The Hierarchy by James Islington, and I think this is the most ambitious book 2 that I may have ever read. I think that the multi-POV approach in here, without giving spoilers, is a very fresh and novel take in a fantasy series. I can't say that I have read another fantasy series that does what this book does. As far as execution, sure, there are some things that can be improved on, but I just so much liked this and prefer this book over book 1. I'm noticing a bit of an inverse relationship in the amount of people who really liked book 1, Will of the Many, not enjoying book 2, and vice versa. I didn't really like the first book. I think the hype and expectations totally ruined that book for me. I heard a lot of people say that Will of the Many book 1 is one of the best, if not the best, fantasy book ever written, and frankly, it's nowhere near or close. Is it a good book? Yes. Did it make me want to read book 2? Absolutely. But book 2, Strength of the Few, is just so much better in my opinion. I think the side characters are a lot better. I think the main character himself is a lot more believable. He's not as much of a Mary Sue as I think he is in book 1, at least in my personal opinion. And for that reason, I think this comes in at number 9. Now, admittedly, I don't think on a long-term approach, if we revisit this video in a year, that this is going to make it into the top 10. But for now, it earns the spot at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have my favorite book in the Greenbone Saga, which is definitely one of my favorite trilogies of all time, and that is Jade War. This book is operating at a completely different level compared to a lot of other sequel books in a trilogy. A lot of the times I feel like sequel books in a trilogy definitely suffer from that quote-unquote sequel syndrome, in that they just try to double things and try to make the world so much bigger than it needs to be, but this is a perfect example of what I want in a book 2. I definitely think the overall tonality of this shifts into more political intrigue, and I definitely like that in a book series. I tend to like political intrigue over action in a lot of series, but this book definitely has both. I do think Jade War may be a little bit mislabeled in terms of the overall name, because this is not necessarily a war in the traditional aspect where there's bombs going off and there's constant violence, but this is more of a war of culture and the minds, and I really appreciated the expansion, not just from Kikon, but into the main continent, and how it talks about xenophobia and other really, really powerful themes. Call Shaylin San in this is absolutely my favorite FMC of all time. I think her arc is absolutely brilliant. I like even some of the little spicy scenes in this. Yes, there are some spicy scenes, but this is an adult book, so why wouldn't there be spicy scenes? I think Fonda Lee, as a writer, really does everything well. I think her prose is really good but approachable. Her characters are amazing. I could gush about every single one of the characters, and I think that her plot is well structured. Some people can guess what's going to happen in this. I wasn't one of those people, and that's why this is coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is book 7 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl franchise. I think this is the only S-tier book in this entire series, and I understand that is an unpopular opinion, but I do think that the books do get progressively better. I just don't think that the first 4 books really live up to the hype for me. So I really just want to say that if you're getting into Dungeon Crawler Carl and you think it's not for you, you think the video game stuff is a little bit too kitschy, you think the formula is a little bit too repetitive, just hold on, because books 5, 6, and 7 are so much better, especially this book. This is where the stakes get escalated to a giant level and different degree, where things are happening inside and outside of the dungeon. The character development is completely unmatched to the rest of the book books in this series, and I think the plot is at its absolute zaniest and wackiest and absolute silliest. This is the one that I laughed at the most. This is the one that I not necessarily cried at, but weeped at the most, and I really enjoy all of the side characters that get introduced into this book series. I think finally, a 7th book in a series, I understand, is a little bit too late to get to an S tier, but for me, I did enjoy the other books in this series. They're very entertaining. They just weren't really engaging until, again, like I said, books 5, 6, and 7. So this one is the one that you really want to wait out for, and I have really high hopes on book 8 being hopefully better than this one. But for now, this is going to come in at number 7. Coming in at number 6, we have the conclusion to one of my favorite series of all time, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen with Wrath by John Gwynne. I do think that the overall series is a lot better than just each individual work of art, and that in its sense means that it is better than the sum of its parts, but I just struggled putting this in the top 5 because I think in terms of individual bodies of work, this one fractionally just doesn't get to the level of top 5, but this one is unbelievably good. I think all of the books in this series are 5 stars, and that is very rare for me. Even books that are in the top 5 of the individuals of this do not get 5 stars on every single one in the series. So just take that with a grain of salt, because I think that the way that you get connected with all of the characters in this is unmatched. I love the battle scenes in this. I love the fact that we're getting invention of different war tactics as we go on through the series, and the emotional impact is just so unbelievably high. I think I did read this series faster than any other series on this list, and for that, it's going to come in at number 6, but there's always a chance that in my heart of hearts, this goes top 5. But for now, we're going to put Wrath at number 6. Before we get into the top 5, make sure you like and subscribe if you like book breakdowns, reviews, and rankings just like this. I am trying to get to my first 500 subscribers here on YouTube, and this is my first long-form video. So if you want more long-form videos like this, drop it in the comments, and let's do some really quick honorable mentions before we get into the top 5. Honorable mention number 1, going to Parable of the Talents. This is emotionally devastating and a very necessary read. It's very sad that we did not get the finale of this series as the author tragically passed away, but this is still such a really necessary and excellent read. Honorable mention number 2 has to go to Babel by R.F. Kuang. I think this is my favorite dark academia book. It took me a little bit to get into, but the end is so worth the build up, and I think that this is an overhated piece of work here on YouTube. Final honorable mention to a book that really should be on the top 10 here, and that is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. I think this book is unbelievably good. It's one of the darkest and bleakest stories that I have ever read to date, but it has one of the most fantastic endings of any of the books on this list, and that's why it's going to be an honorable mention, but it may be on the top 10 if we revisit this in a year from now. Coming in at number 5 is a book that completely changed the way that I read forever, and that is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Before reading this book, I would be lucky to finish 3 books on a year, or even just barely 1 book a year, which on the whole is still a good amount of number of books, but I would never be really back into reading had I not picked this up. This made me want to read daily again. This made me want to find other people who like books like this, and frankly, this is such a huge inspiration to a lot of the best science fiction and fantasy authors that are out there right now that I think it is a genuine, necessary must read. The structure is very unique and can be a little bit hard to digest, as there are no real chapters in this book. You get multiple different POV swaps, and that is basically the quote-unquote chapters that you get in here. So yes, just knowing that going in, it can be a little bit hard to get into, but I can't even show you the book that I read originally because it's destroyed. I had a mass market paperback that I would take to the freaking pool with me, and in that 90-degree weather, that glue stood no chance, and it completely disintegrated because I just couldn't stop reading that book. I love this series so much. It's deeply impactful. It's deeply emotional. It's got all of the really cool elements of sci-fi, and I think the fact that you get all of these different POVs means that you will likely connect with very different characters than I did. I personally really liked Sol Weintraub, the Scholar. The Scholar. He is definitely my favorite character in this, but I love hearing other people's opinions because I think the way that this is written is it is written for everybody to get a very different thing out of it, and I think that is the best thing about reading books is the impact that it makes on our lives. And frankly, I wouldn't have read Red Rising, I wouldn't have read Sanderson, I wouldn't have read Christopher Rocchio had I not read this book, which is why it's coming in at number 5, and it is so hard to talk about any of the books above this one because I would not have read them without Hyperion. Speaking of Sanderson, we have my favorite book that he has ever written, and I am not sure what is ever going to top that, and that is Oathbringer, coming in at number 4 on my all-time list. This is a huge book. At the time of finishing this was the longest book I have ever read, but it was also the quickest I have ever read a large book to date, even talking today. I think that the beginning and the end are the two best parts of this book, and it has the best beginning and best end of any of the Sanderson books. And I think that says a lot because, frankly, a lot of the best parts of Sanderson's writing is that quote-unquote Sanderlanche. So what better way to rank his books than by ranking his best ending? And I think this has the best ending. I do not agree with people who say that this has poor pacing and it has sloppy pacing or it's somewhat slow pacing. I didn't have that problem, and I understand that's a subjective matter, but I think the beginning got me so hooked that I didn't really have a problem carrying that momentum into the middle. Dalinar was my favorite character going into this, cemented him as my favorite character. Leaving this book, this is definitely the peak of his arc. You get so much time with him, and a lot of the times I will rank the Stormlight books based on how much I like the interludes and how much I like the overall flashback chapters. And this one, having all of the Dalinar flashback chapters, was just so impactful for me. I don't know what it is about a strong fatherly figure that can admit his mistakes and move on from them, but that just absolutely works for me, and that's why this is coming in at number 4 and my favorite Sanderson book. Okay, the top 3 were really difficult for me because these are all books that I deeply feel moved by. Not that any of the other ones on here don't make me feel that way. But coming in at number 3 is going to be a little bit controversial, at least to my fan base, because I know I've got all these Red Rising gear. I talk about how Red Rising is my favorite. And this book was my number 1 for a very long time, up until really the last 6 months. So without further ado, number 3 on this list, we have Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. I think this is the most polished piece of work that Pierce Brown has put out to date, and it is a masterpiece. I absolutely love this book. I think everything about this book is what I like about science fiction. It's got the really devastating character arcs. It's got really good twists and turns in the plot that you can't necessarily see coming. And the best thing about Pierce Brown's writing is the way that he makes us feel connected to everything in this story. And I just love the themes about Red Rising. I've talked about how Hyperion made me seek out other books, but Red Rising really defined my reading pace and really made it just so that I can read a lot more at a time. And what I mean by that is I read all of these books in 6 weeks, and I have never read that many books in a series ever in that time frame. And now I've just gotten faster and faster and quicker at reading, specifically because of Red Rising, because this made me understand what my taste was. I thought Hyperion was just like a perfect building block foundationally for me as a reader, and Red Rising was really something that built upon that, because I did read it within a pretty short time frame of finishing The Fall of Hyperion, the second book that I was talking about earlier before. But I love this book. It's so good. It just barely didn't get to number 2 and number 1 on this list. Number 2 is Shadows Upon Time. This is the finale to the Sun Eater series. To all the people watching this who have just started the Sun Eater series or are on the fence about starting the Sun Eater series, I will tell you that as someone who really values payoffs and endings over beginnings and world building, this is the book for you. This is my new gold standard when it comes to series finales. It is just so incredibly good. It's a masterpiece in my opinion. I think this book and Demon in White are going to be 2 of the best science fiction books that I ever read, and I think that those 2 books alone categorize Sun Eater as a future classic for me. I do think that a lot of the way that we get here can be a bit of a stumble, and I didn't love Disquiet God, so I didn't actually expect this book to make it on the list. I thought that Demon in White would be my favorite Sun Eater book till the end of time, but this book, this must be, because this book is fantastic to me. I love the characters in this. The side characters are so much better in this book than really any of the other books almost combined, except for, of course, Demon in White, where I thought that is the other best example of characters in this. And even just knowing what's going to happen in this book, because if you're unfamiliar with the Sun Eater series, the author tells you the ending of this book in the very first page of the first book, Empire of Silence. And even all that, knowing what's going to happen, knowing the light of that murdered sun is going to haunt me for the rest of my days, I still had no idea how this was going to end. And everything about this just levels up. The prose, the characters, the plot, everything I'm just rambling on about is just so amazing. And I thought this was going to be my #1 book of all time. That is until I read this next book. And that book, my #1 book of all time, has to be A Storm of Swords. This is the 3rd book in A Song of Ice and Fire. This is the best book I have ever read in any genre, period. And that is coming from someone who is an avid watcher and lover of the show. I used to go to other people's houses with box sets of the show before this even came out on streaming to watch the 1st and 2nd and 3rd seasons with people because of how much I was obsessed with this writing. If you didn't know this yet, I used to read the Wildcard series, which is the other series by George R.R. Martin that is, side note, being adapted into a TV series by Amazon at some point, and I thought, man, I just really have to get into the series because I loved the Wildcard books. Now, as somebody who has held out for so long, I am of course kicking myself, but it's also very validating that I held out for so long because I knew getting into this series, I was going to be obsessively attached to everything about this series, and this book definitely cements that. And the reason it's validating is because we may never get the ending, and that's the only real reason I held off on reading this series. But this book alone is worth reading, and I just need to convince you, if I could reach through the phone and hit the checkout button and buy now on whatever, Amazon cart you may or may not have to buy this book, I would do it. This is going to be the book that if I ever see it in your wish list, I'm probably going to buy it for you because this is unbelievably good. I thought as an avid show watcher and lover, like I've mentioned already, that I would be prepared for all of the twists and turns and developmental pieces that exist in this book, but I just wasn't. This is a true 6-star experience for me, and this has changed the way that I look at books for the rest of my life. And I don't know if anything will ever top this, but if anything even comes close to this, I'll be happy, and that's why this is my #1 book of all time. So thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos just like this.